waiting room, but in the interest of time, Neil, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you, Elisa, and I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, our monthly webinar, and our topic today is when and how to hire an arborist. Let me introduce myself first by saying that I will be your host today. My name is Neil Letson, and we also have, is our part of this duo here, putting this together, is Elisa Merca from the University of Tennessee School of Natural Resources, and she will be handling the technical aspect of this. And I really appreciate you, Elisa, for filling in for Katie, who normally does your job, but was unable to be here today. But thank you for stepping in for her. All right, we have a diverse audience here. Some of you have attended some of these webinars in the past, but there may be some of you who are first-time viewers. And for those of you that are, today's webinar is part of a monthly series. It's brought to you free of charge through a partnership between the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council and the University of Tennessee School of Natural Resources. Our sole purpose is educational and hopefully inspirational, where we try to offer a wide range of topics that hopefully will deepen all of our understanding of the importance of trees in our communities, but also provide us maybe some ideas and ways that we can do our part to grow healthier urban forests in the places where you and I live. Now, we have noticed over the past few months that our reach has expanded, not just to Tennessee and the South, but also throughout the country and even to some other nations and countries across the world, and we're real pleased to do that. And for me, I think it's an opportunity to get some good feedback from all of you folks. So if you have any topics of interest that you'd like us to schedule, and especially if you have a speaker in mind that we could arrange to do a presentation, please let us know through the chat room, and we will definitely consider that. And hopefully you can help us make this a better educational outreach in the future. So before we begin, we need to cover a couple of housekeeping items, and I'm going to turn it over to Elisa, and you've got some things to tell us.
So this slide on the screen here is about making sure your participant name is, your first and last name, and that is important if you are requesting CEUs for attending this webinar. We do have your information from where you registered for the webinar. But the way that we confirm attendance is we pull this report from Zoom. And so it's important that your name is your first and last name. Some people will have like Bob's iPhone as their Zoom participant name, and there might be 20 Bobs that attended that day. So it's important for us when we're submitting the information for CEUs that we have your full first and last name in your Zoom username. And here are some instructions on the screen about how to change that if you need to. And the other thing I was going to mention is that we will have time at the end for Q&A with Skip. Right now, you are able to put questions throughout the talk in chat as you have them. And then at the end, you'll be able to unmute yourself if you'd rather ask in person.
Okay, thanks, Elisa. And while you're switching sharing privileges over to Skip, let me give a simple introduction to Skip Kincaid, who is the Executive Director of the ISA Southern Chapter. And Skip is located right now in St. Louis, Missouri. I guess that's your home base, but that's where you're coming to us from. And we want to welcome Skip. And I also want to thank him personally for all the help he's given us with our ISA CEU credits. Skip, I don't think we could do it without your help and support for us to make sure our attendees get credit for watching these webinars. So thank you for that. So Skip, the presentation, the time is yours.
All right. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Alyssa. Appreciate it. Appreciate the technical help. And also, Neil, appreciate you just kind of getting this whole series put together. I'm always amazed at a lot of these extension webinars and outreach efforts that reach such a big audience. And boy, what a diverse audience. We got Martin Lee Choi saying coming in from Singapore, and it's midnight over there. So, man, you are desperate for some tree knowledge. That's all I can say, but that's awesome. I see a few familiar folks on there. Dan Hartman, good to see you on there, brother. It was good to see you in Chattanooga at the Southern Chapter Conference a few weeks ago. And Neil, I do appreciate the comments about Southern Chapter. I am currently the executive director of the ISA Southern Chapter. Most of you that are arborists probably already know about International Society of Arboriculture. If you don't, I will educate you a little bit as we go through this presentation. And for those of you that may be here that are not arborists, maybe you're a homeowner, maybe you're, whatever field you're in, we're going to educate you a little bit about what arborists are all about. And, we're just going to kind of scratch the surface because we are really a diverse crowd, not only diverse in skills, but diverse in geography. I mean, my goodness, look at where people are coming from today, Florida, Singapore, all over the world. And that's one of the beautiful things about this field of arboriculture. We're all over the place. And ISA, the International Society of Arboriculture, as its name indicates, is an international organization. While trees species may differ from one place to another, the basic component of understanding trees and the passion of trees and understanding the benefits of trees is pretty universal. So ISA is a great organization that serves those of us who have strong passion about trees and serve the tree industry. So as the executive director of Southern Chapter, my responsibility primarily is for the southeastern United States. We cover basically an area from the Carolinas all the way over to Louisiana. And then the northern extent is primarily Arkansas and Tennessee. Kentucky has their own chapter, Georgia has their own chapter, and Florida has their own chapter. So that kind of gives you an idea of the extent of our responsibilities. And our primary responsibility as a chapter is to serve our members and to serve the professional credential holders that live within our region. And we're going to talk about some of those professional credentials as we go through this. I realize that a lot of you are professional arborists, but I'm going to kind of direct some of what we do to people that may not be arborists or may be, interested in what arborists are all about or how to find them and how to hire them, as the title of the presentation implies. So if this seems really basic for you, I can sugarcoat it and try to say it's still going to be beneficial, and it is, but you're just going to have to tough through it. Sometimes it's good to hear the basic stuff again. John Price, good to see you from Long Island. I don't know if we've run across each other before. I do trek courses out at Oyster Bay a couple of times a year, so maybe we've run across each other out there. So just to kind of jump into this topic, we all know that trees are good, right? Trees do wonderful things. Most of us, in fact, very likely all of us are here today because we have a passion or an interest in trees. And, there's just been tons of research to back up this idea that trees have value. We know about the myriad of benefits that trees provide to over 220 million people who live in urban areas. And we realize there are trees in forest and, those types of ecosystems, but we've come to understand that the urban setting is an ecosystem in and of itself. Trees operate based on the ecosystem where they're present. So we know that urban trees are maybe just a little different than trees in a woodland setting, but we do know that we appreciate them. And there's just such a vast difference between neighborhoods that have trees as compared to neighborhoods that don't. A lot of the studies that have been performed talk about the social benefits, just the psychology of people that grow up around trees as compared to people who grow up in areas without trees. So, we know that trees have this huge, plate of benefits that they provide. And of course, we now have a way to measure some of those benefits. We have models that have been developed. iTree is a very common one, very commonly used, that takes into account the fact that trees provide a lot of technical benefits. We have measured that urban areas with trees don't have as much stormwater runoff because we know that the canopy captures a lot of that moisture. It transpires or evaporates back into the atmosphere and never becomes part of the stormwater system. So engineers that design and build and maintain these stormwater systems have learned that trees are a great green infrastructure that can provide stormwater benefits, and we can measure the dollar value of those benefits. We know that there's energy savings. We know that trees scrub the air of particulates and other gas pollutants and so forth. The list just goes on and on and on. So we can measure these annual benefits, and it's a great way for us to go to decision makers and say, hey, we need to have a forestry department, or we need to fund our forestry department better because we want to promote and care for our trees so that we can, obtain all of these benefits. So it's a great way to do that. We know that trees have these values, but a lot of times people are a little selfish, and the idea is, well, what about my tree? What's my tree worth? And so sometimes we look at the value of trees not only as this list of annual benefits that they provide, but we may have a need to calculate the appraised value of a tree. What's a tree worth? Maybe somebody mistakenly cuts down a tree on your property, or maybe it's going to be lost due to some taking by a government agency that needs to widen a road or something. So, there are methods now that can be used to calculate the value of a tree, the actual appraised value of a tree. And you can use that value in court or insurance or, other ways to perhaps, get some value for a tree that was lost. And, it's always weird to do this because to think of trees in terms of just dollars and cents, those of us that have strong passion for trees, we know that a lot of these values go way beyond just the dollars and cents. But it's also reassuring to know that we have these tools available for calculating value. I'm not going to go through this formula, but I just wanted to show you, and this is actually sort of an old version of the formula, but, for example, a white pine in the Midwest, about 18 inches in diameter. Once we go through the formula and go through this whole process, it's going to be worth around $5,800. And for some people, that seems like a lot of money, especially the person who cut the tree and is perhaps being sued for the value of the tree. Seems like a lot of money. But for the owner of that tree, it may not seem like much. So, it's based on your perspective, but at least we have some standardized, repeatable methodologies that we can use to talk about the dollar value of trees. But again, bottom line, we know that trees are good, right? And ISA has this companion website and sort of a campaign where they've titled it exactly that: trees are good. When they came up with this years ago, I just thought it was absolute genius. And, you know, for a lot of us in the field, we go to the ISA website or we go to the publications for a lot of the science and a lot of the knowledge about trees. But for homeowners, this Trees Are Good website is a great way for them to learn about trees, learn about caring for trees, learn about arborists. And it's super easy to find. It's treesaregood.org. If you ever forget that, you can just do a Google search or whatever search engine you use. Trees Are Good, and you'll find it. Super easy to find. So kind of getting into this idea of trees and arborists and you know, how do we find an arborist to care for our trees? You know, we know that trees are incredibly diverse, big, small, you know, evergreen, you know, angiosperm, the ones that lose their leaves every year, deciduous. You know, there's a lot of ways to look at trees, and we know that some trees live a super long time. I think this is bristlecone pine, thousands of years. And then, of course, there are some trees that don't live for very long. They just, for some reason, whether it's root related or something, they just don't make it, right? But we do know that trees are part of a system. Rarely are they alone, you know, and growing on their own. They are part of some type of system, even if they're widely spaced apart. And it could be a forest system, you know, a forest ecosystem where, you know, it's primarily dominated by trees and tree canopy and the litter that falls to the ground and woody material that falls to the ground and enriches the soil and creates this wonderful cycle. But we know that trees in forest settings are part of a system, but you know, this is a little different, right? You know, we have an urban tree, and somebody, you know, was kind enough to let us know this is a dead tree. But these trees are part of a system as well, like I mentioned earlier. They may be very restricted in their root zone and limited to these little vaults or boxes, which seems a cruel way to grow a tree. But it's a way for us to bring those benefits that we were talking about that trees provide into the urban environment. Not only these technical, measurable dollar value benefits, but also these social benefits in terms of what they just do for our well-being. And those can be measured as well. We're able to calculate the value of those benefits as well. But we know that trees, even in urban settings, are part of a system. Hopefully, if they're in an urban setting or in a community, there's somebody with some tree knowledge that is responsible for managing this population of trees. And they need to understand these dynamics that are associated with managing a population of trees. So again, some very basic stuff. We know that these trees in an urban setting are very different than trees that grow in a forest setting or in this forest and tree dominated ecosystem. Very, very different, right? We don't get as much nutrient cycling in an urban environment. People rake up the leaves. When they cut a tree down, they cut everything up and haul it off. Maybe somebody grinds it up into mulch or makes compost or, you know, whatever they do with it, and return some of that to the soil. But we tend to rely on a lot of, I don't want to call it artificial, but we tend to rely on management of trees in urban settings to try and recreate or to try and provide as much of what a tree in a forest setting would get in terms of nutrition, in terms of space and so forth. And we know that there's competition for space for urban trees. We have underground utilities, we have overhead utilities, we have buildings, we have driveways, roadways, all kinds of impervious surfaces. And we know that even forest trees have these kinds of restrictions as well. their canopies all kind of compete with each other, for space. Their root system competes for space and nutrients and water and so on. And some studies show us that some city trees actually grow faster than forest trees, because they tend to be warmer. Those environments, if you've heard of the urban heat island, urban areas tend to be warmer. We have a lot more dark surfaces, impervious surfaces that hold a lot of that heat and then release it. And so we tend to be a little warmer. So in one way that we look at it, we could say that urban trees maybe grow a little faster, but we also kind of know that urban trees have it kind of rough, don't they? They have a lot of limitations, just physical space. Their roots are trying to find places to grow. Sometimes they have to deal with compacted soils. And if some species of trees that grow in compacted soil, they tend to run their roots right along the surface where they can get a mix of soil and oxygen and water. So that creates some problems, right? And then we also have just the limitation of space. We have tree canopies that might conflict with some overhead utilities. They might conflict with underground utilities, water lines, gas lines, and maybe even electric if it's underground electric. And like I mentioned, they compete for space around your home. We don't necessarily want branches banging into the house. We like the shade, but there's some management that needs to take place in order to care for those trees in urban environments. And then, of course, during construction, we know that trees kind of get the short straw, right? Physical damage to the tree, compacted soils, excavated soils, piled up soils. The list goes on and on and on. So, urban trees kind of have it rough. And one of the rough things that happen is that homeowners get their hands on them. And we don't like to paint homeowners in a bad light, but we know that. I mean, I'm a homeowner and I'm a do-it-yourself kind of person. I like to try to fix this or fix that. And I always think that I know enough. I watch a YouTube video and feel like, well, I know enough to go ahead and tackle this wiring job, right? Well, electricity can be dangerous, so you kind of have to respect it. And I have a pretty good respect to know when something is beyond my ability and expertise, and I'll call somebody in to do that. But when it comes to landscaping and trees, a lot of homeowners think they can do it. They buy a pair of lopping shears, or they go to the store and buy themselves a chainsaw. I mean, just the thought of that kind of makes my hair stand on end. But sometimes they kind of brutalize trees. So, the idea is to make sure that you do your homework before you take part in these types of activities. And of course, the message that I'm going to here. There's a point where you're going to have to call an expert. You're going to have to call an arborist. So, understanding about all of these things that urban trees have to deal with. And again, put this all in the context of these urban trees. Not only do they exist in this kind of harsher environment, limited root zones, competing for space, compacted soils, pollution, but they're also subject to a lot of times a wider range of issues, whether it's insect disease, nutrition issues, and they're also growing by their very name, urban trees. They're growing where people live. So now we have that added dynamic of trees and people. Trees where people live, trees where people work, trees where people play. And so when we mix those two together, in one perspective, it's a beautiful thing because people can enjoy all these benefits. But on the other hand, it also increases the idea of risk. We don't want dead trees. We don't want dying trees around where people live, play, and congregate, because we know that it creates risk. So it's a whole new dynamic. It's a whole new way of looking at trees, not just the structural issues and cavity and decay and insects and disease and nutrition. We got to think about all these things, not just about the tree, but also how that affects the people who are around that tree as well. Okay. So, let's kind of focus in on this idea of structural issues with a tree. This is what creates a lot of concern for people. Hey, I got this tree in my yard. It has I just noticed this big hole in the tree, and how they missed it in the past is a mystery to me sometimes. But all of a sudden they see this big hole, or maybe even this broken branch that's hanging up in the tree. They didn't notice it before. And so they become alarmed and they want to know, like, well, what do I do? How, who do I call? How do I deal with this? And of course, as we're going to shift to here in a little bit, you're going to need to call an arborist, because an arborist will understand that this decay in this cavity is a defect. It is to some degree something that has gone amiss or something that is going wrong with the tree. We know that it's an issue. But a good arborist at the same time is also going to see right along the margins of that opening and that decay. We see something, and I'm hopeful that my cursor is showing up here on the screen. We're seeing this ring of smoother textured tissue, and we call this wound wood. And this wound wood is a way that the tree responds to this defect. As that cavity becomes bigger and the tree starts to wobble or move a little bit more than it normally would, it reacts to that. It understands that there's a problem. And so it begins to generate this tissue that will add strength. We can even see a little bit of a bulge right here in some of the tissue on the side of the tree that is an attempt for the tree to add strength. So an arborist is going to understand the true amount of risk that may be present here, not just be shocked by a big cavity or dead limbs and automatically think of removal. A good arborist is going to understand the full spectrum of things that are happening and be able to provide the right information to a tree owner. A good arborist is going to be able to diagnose insect issues and kind of understand what some of the current hot buttons are, in the Midwest and through a lot of the South and the Northeast. Emerald ash borer is the big thing now, right? Ash trees that are growing in communities that are left untreated are very likely going to succumb to emerald ash borer. But again, a good arborist will know that there are treatments. There are ways that we can deal with this and when to prescribe and how to do the treatments and so on. Diseases, urban trees and trees in general suffer from disease, and an arborist is going to understand these diseases and what the possible impact on the tree is going to be. Is it something that's long-term and will cause decline in the tree, or is this just something that's an appearance issue and the tree may go ahead and deal with it? So arborists have to understand this idea of diseases and prescriptions and so on. Sometimes the issue is just simply nutrition. And this is especially true in urban settings. We may end up with soils that just aren't quite right for the tree that was planted. Maybe it's a tree that prefers an acid soil, but it's planted in a soil that isn't acid enough. Or maybe it's watered with municipal tap water, which tends to have a higher pH. And so the soil becomes what we call alkaline. But if we just, if we understand this as a nutritional issue, again, a good arborist can make prescriptions about treating that nutrition issue. So, you know, if we know that all these issues are out there, and we know that there's so many things that go wrong, you know, how do we protect these trees, and how do we reduce the chance for issues? And again, the obvious answer, hire an arborist. And we'll kind of talk about, we'll get into the meat of that in just a little bit. But there are times when you see that something is wrong. You don't really understand exactly what it is, but you want to find out. You want to find out if this is a long-term issue for the tree. Or maybe you're the kind of person that is very proactive, and you want to take steps to keep your tree as healthy as you can so that it's in a better position to fight off issues that may develop. All right. So as a homeowner, you know, what do you do? You know, well, you could take some classes. You know, there are plenty of university extension opportunities, local community colleges. Maybe you're blessed with some type of a botanical garden near you. Here in St. Louis, we have Missouri Botanical Garden, just wonderful facility, great educational opportunities there. So this is a great way for homeowners and people that aren't arborists to learn about trees. I used to teach at a local community college for a couple of years that offered 2-year degrees in horticulture. So, you know, a lot of the people in the class weren't even going to get into the field of arboriculture. They just wanted to earn this associate's degree or maybe a certificate to show that they had learned a lot about horticulture or maybe trees. If you are a novice and you are wanting to get into this field, maybe you go ahead and stick around and earn some advanced degrees, bachelor's degree, master's, PhD, those sort of things. Takes a lot of time. Or maybe you just spend a lot of years getting some experience. I know people that work at, you know, the local landscape center, and they've been there for 10, 15 years, and they're absolutely genius in terms of their knowledge about trees, not only the right tree to select and buy, but how to identify issues and so forth. So just having experience is a great way to learn. But of course, you know, the end of the line would be, or not the end of the line, but you know, the epitome, I guess, would be earning some sort of a professional credential. So there are a lot of people that go on this journey to become an arborist or to learn about trees and tree issues. You know, it may just start with an interest or a passion or a part-time job, maybe from a labor standpoint, but with experience, whether you get a degree or not, you know, eventually you get to the point where you have this knowledge and skill set where maybe you can earn a professional credential. And we're going to talk about some of those credentials in just a little bit. So, you know, the other option, rather than you just learning all this stuff yourself, is, hey, why don't you go out and hire a professional, right? Hire an arborist. You know, when I have some kind of a leak in my sink or this or that, you know, I pretty much have the tools to fix it. But, you know, we had an issue here. I live in a house that's well over 100 years, and, you know, some of the main drains that were in the ground or under the floor just got to the point where they had to be redone. That was a little beyond my skill set and my expertise. I hired a plumber. You know, I hired a licensed plumber, somebody that had the skill and the professional knowledge and the credentials, by the way, to do the job correctly. And we've been very pleased. And it's the same thing with trees. You know, there are certain things you can do yourself, but there comes a time when you simply have to hire an arborist. I don't know that any homeowner wants to do the two things that we see on the right side of the screen, the picture in the top and the picture on the right. There are not many homeowners prepared for that type of work, right? And, some of the work that arborists do is very technical. Some of it's not quite so technical. We got this picture of this person on the left side of the screen, and they're banging on the tree with the rubber mallet. Well, what's that all about? Well, part of the skill set, part of your experiential knowledge is being able to tap on trees with a rubber mallet, engaging what you hear just from the sound. It's kind of like thumping a watermelon or thumping some kind of a fruit to tell whether it's ripe or not. And of course, with trees, we're tapping on them to listen for hollow areas or areas that maybe have less dense wood that might indicate some internal decay. So these are all skill sets that an arborist will have. Identifying diseases, identifying insects. These are all skill sets that a good arborist is going to have that a homeowner may not have. So when do you make that choice? When do you say, okay, I got to call somebody. This is beyond me, and I need somebody. And I talk to people about this all the time. If you just don't know trees, and I feel sad for these people, but there are some people who just don't know trees. I had a friend of mine, he's actually a pretty well-known national sportscaster guy. I did some work with him at a radio station years ago, and his wife had called and wanted me to come by and look at a tree in their yard. So I go by the house, knock on the front door. Well, this friend of mine, the sportscaster, answers the door, and he looks at me and he says, "Skip, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, Randy asked me to come by and look at your tree out here." And he just kind of stuck his head out the door, looked over, and he goes, "I didn't even know we had a tree." So there are people like this, that just don't understand trees, don't appreciate trees. And if you're that kind of person and you need tree work, you better call an arborist, right? If you are the kind of person that gets out in your yard and you walk around, you enjoy the landscape, or maybe even you're doing a little bit of work outside, you're going to see things, and you're going to kind of understand, well, my tree looks healthy. But then all of a sudden you may look at it and you go, something's wrong. That branch is cracked and it's hanging down, or the tree has a new lean to it and the soil's sticking up on one side, or maybe the leaves all of a sudden take on a different color. Well, that's probably a good time to call an arborist, okay? The other rule that I give people, and this is kind of a hardcore rule, if you think you need to do some tree work on trees in your yard and your feet need to leave the ground, call an arborist. I just absolutely cringe when I see people on ladders, especially when they have a saw in their hand and they're on a ladder. It's very scary. Another good time to think about calling an arborist is when you're going to buy a new home. A lot of people hire a home inspector. They want to know if the wiring works and the plumbing works and structurally if it's okay. But very few people think about hiring an arborist to come in and do an inspection of the trees on the property. And it's amazing how many times we end up doing work for people that have just bought a new house and now they're stuck with removing a tree, and they had no idea they were going to get hit with that expense. And when a tree dies or when a tree has issues and needs to be removed, insurance isn't going to pay you to have that tree work done. So that comes out of your pocket. So good thing to know, in terms of the health of your trees, if you're planning to buy a new home. If you're going to do any construction, maybe you're building a new home or you're adding on to a home, or, there are times I talk to people on the phone about a tree issue and I say, well, have you had any construction done recently? And they say, no construction. And then as we keep talking, they tell me about this new sewer line that was dug through their yard. And so that's when I learned that, you gotta be careful with your words when you talk to people. That when they think of construction, they're thinking of something new that was built. It's not the same as grading to install a pipeline or something. So the effect is very similar, but you need to be very clear with your questions. So anything that's going to disrupt the soil where the tree roots are located could be considered construction or grading. And so if you're planning that, you want to get an arborist involved so that you can put a plan together to try to minimize some of that trauma or eliminate it altogether. A good plan will eliminate the trauma. And maybe you're the kind of person who just likes to have regular inspections. A lot of heating and cooling companies now get you to buy into a program for an annual inspection of your system. And I'm one of those people. I like to know that my stuff is working, right? So same thing with trees. A lot of arborists will provide annual inspections or regular inspections of trees on your property. So, just kind of diving into a couple of these, if you have a big cavity in your tree, you're going to need an arborist to provide some sense of how much of an issue you really have here. They can't predict failure. When we see a cavity in a tree like this one on the left, we can't predict anything that's going to happen. We do know that the likelihood of failure of a tree with a large cavity might be slightly higher than a tree without a cavity. But if that cavity is decades old, and again, we're seeing this wound wood response around this cavity. If it's decades old, what makes you think that it's likely to fail this year or next year, fairly soon? Chances are really not that high. So you may need an arborist to give you a good indication about how likely failure might be, how likely it is to hit some nearby targets, what the consequences might be, and give you some sense of what type of risk is associated with a defect like this. And a good arborist is going to give you a pretty accurate estimate about the risk that's associated with this. It's not always doom and gloom when we have big decay like this. Sometimes the tree knows that it's hollow on the inside, it's added enough strength, and it's going to continue to grow perhaps decades more. If you have dead limbs in the tree or cracked limbs in the tree, an arborist, we see an arborist at work here working on this tree in the top right. An arborist is going to know what to do if you have limbs that need to be removed, how to remove them properly, the right way to do the work. We talked earlier about nutrition issues. An arborist is going to understand that this leaf color is a nutrition issue and be able to give you some prescriptions about what to do with it. So, here we are with my rule about if you got to leave the ground, you better hire an arborist. The person on the left reaching way out from a ladder, no safety equipment on. I just cringe when I see these things. And even though this guy on the right, these two pictures on the right, he kind of looks like he knows what he's doing. He's got some high vis on. He's got these boots and other things. That is not an arborist. He ended up dropping his saw. It's on a cable, and that's his wife down below there on the ladder. And I won't show you the last picture because it's not a pleasant ending. I don't think she ends up getting hit with the saw, but he falls, she falls. It's just a recipe for disaster if you have to get off the ground when you're doing tree work. All right. It's a pretty strong rule in my book. If you have to leave the ground, call an arborist. All right. And we talked about buying a new home. An arborist can come out, do kind of a walkthrough assessment for you. It might be risk, looking for things that create risk, or maybe just looking at tree health. It could be that they actually provide a detailed map of the property. We do this all the time. We'll go onto a property. We use some GPS software. We map the trees. We give them a map of their trees and a list of all the things that they need. It really helps to give a prospective homeowner or a new homeowner an idea of what's going on. Great tool. The whole construction idea. An arborist is going to help you avoid what we see on the left, where there's a lot of soil compaction, soil fill. A good arborist may prescribe things like what we see on the right, some tree protection fencing in the right places, talking to contractors about where they can go, where they can't go. And I have found that on most construction sites, contractors are actually very agreeable about protecting trees, as long as it's communicated to them ahead of time, so that if it's going to take a little extra time and a few extra steps, they're more than willing to take those, but it might cost a little more money. And some people groan, when you require this kind of thing, some municipalities require this protection, and some builders will groan about it. The added cost to a project is about 1%. It's not that big. It's a minor part of doing construction. And, again, the plan, if you get an arborist involved, if a home is going to be built back in this area, you can identify, if you create a map, you can identify which trees are going to be removed. Maybe even the map would show a tree protection fence going along the drip line or the edge of these trees. And that fencing would restrict contractors so that they're only going to impact the built area. They're not going to get into the root system of nearby trees. These are the kind of things that an arborist can do for you. So we've talked about a lot of different skills and a lot of different things that arborists do. And one of the things that is kind of universal with good arborists is that they're professional. They're technically competent. They know how to put a rope in a tree. They know how to climb. They know how to operate equipment. They're experienced. They've gone through training, not only training about biologically the right thing to do for a tree, but also training in terms of safety, their own personal safety and the safety of perhaps the property owner. And they have knowledge about what it takes to care for trees in a landscape. A lot of these terms, or a lot of these parts of identifying arborist, are in the ISA glossary of arboriculture terms. This is what the International Society of Arboriculture defines us as arborists, right? But we know that there are a lot of different types of arborists. I'm not going to go through this list. It's presented this way just to give you an idea of the broad range of skills and tasks and things that arborists do. Sure, they get up in trees and climb trees and use ropes and prune and so forth, but they also work with engineers and architects to do tree protection plans. They may work for a utility to manage vegetation along a utility line. They may work for a nonprofit that promotes the benefits of trees in a community and provides trees for planting and so forth. They may be consultants. They may do some type of consulting work. So a lot of different types of arborists. And it's good to understand this so that when you feel like, hey, I need an arborist, you can at least try to find the right one that will have the skill set that you need to get some work done, okay? So yeah, climbers are a big part of our arborist community. These are the folks that are up in the trees doing the work. And what a tremendous amount of skill they have. It's kind of like rock climbing and mountain climbing, and they're gymnasts. They absolutely are, but they also understand all of the biology and the science that goes behind actually making cuts in a tree. Some arborists are more business people than they are, touching trees. They may own the company, they may manage operations. If they get involved with sales, they probably understand or know a lot about trees. But a wide range of skill sets here. Probably and I don't want to call it the highest end, but probably one of the more technical ends of arboriculture is the arborist that can diagnose tree issues, communicate that diagnosis and prognosis to a client. Hey, here's how bad it's going to be. Provide options for treatment. We call this plant health care, and a lot of arborists get involved with plant health care. There are also a lot of arborists that do consulting and write reports and actually provide expert witness opinions for attorneys or insurance companies and so forth. So a wide range of arborists out there, okay? Utility, nonprofit work, or maybe you work for a municipality. So you kind of have to think about the type of arborist that you need. Do I need somebody that works for a tree service, or do I need a high-end consultant? They might cost you a little more, So it's a good idea to ask an arborist, hey, what's your area of expertise? What kind of work do you do? The other thing you want to ask, and we're going to go through a list of what you should ask here in a minute, but you want to make sure that they have credentials. Now, I've been involved with ISA, with International Society of Arboriculture, for decades, close to 40 years. I did volunteer work for many, many, many of those years, and now I work for the Southern chapter. But, my years volunteering was geared primarily towards the credentials that ISA offers. And probably the most universal that we all hear about is this idea of certified arborist. So ask an arborist, are you a certified arborist? If they hold one of these credentials, they're going to tell you, well, here's the credential I have. I am a certified arborist, but I'm actually a board certified master arborist, which is a little higher end. Or maybe they're specialized. Maybe they specialized in tree work or municipal work or utility work. Or maybe they have a qualification that says they understand how to assess risk in trees. So these are all professional credentials that you can earn. There's another organization, Tree Care Industry Association, TCIA. They accredit companies. It's not so much the individual, but if a company has a strong safety program, meets a lot of the requirements, they can be an accredited tree care company. And then TCIA also offers a lot of safety training and a lot of safety credentials as well. So again, wide range of credentials, wide range of credentials that you can earn. The biggest thing as a homeowner is to ask someone if they are a certified arborist. I'm going to grab just a little bit of water. Always good to have that nearby. So the big thing is just, and I get that question a lot when I show up on somebody's property. I still do a lot of work, and I show up on the property, and the first thing, or even on the phone, first thing they want to know, are you a certified arborist? Are you an ISA certified arborist? And I love when people ask that, because it tells me that people now understand that these credentials exist. Okay. And that's huge. It's a great selling point as an arborist to let somebody know, hey, you know what? I have passed an exam, and I have proven my knowledge of the science and biology behind trees, and I understand trees. And then, like I said, maybe you can go to some of these higher level credentials as well. So credentials are a good thing. All right. Again, ask an arborist, are you a certified arborist? Ask him that. And you may not remember this or not, but ask them if they follow ANSI A300 standards or whatever standards might direct arboriculture in a certain part of the world. Ask for references. Hey, who have you worked for before? Do you have some references? Can I talk to those people? Ask the arborist if they can provide a certificate of insurance. This is huge. This is huge. If they can't provide you a current certificate of insurance, do not hire them. Arborists should carry insurance, and they should have some credentials. It's absolutely critical. And these phrases are still appropriate as well, because it kind of separates somebody who knows from somebody who doesn't. Ask them if they top trees. And if they say, sure, don't hire them. We're not going to get into the whole discussion about topping, but it's a very bad practice. Using spurs to climb a tree that's going to remain. Maybe you're using, the boot attached spurs to get up in a tree. A huge no-no in the industry. So if you ask a potential, somebody you're going to hire to work on your tree, just those 3 simple questions. Are you a certified arborist? Do you top trees? Do you use spurs? You can almost tell right off the bat whether they're going to have a higher level of competence or not. Okay. All right. Get a written estimate. Make sure that any estimate that you get is clearly written, describes the scope of work, what they're going to do, and what are the objectives. What have you told them that you want to do? I want to get rid of this dead limb. I'd like to remove this limb that's hanging out and banging into the roof of my porch. I'd like to raise the low canopy so I can see my yard a little better. What are the objectives of the work? I want to remove the dead tree, and that's a pretty clear objective. Insist again that they're a certified arborist. Also, see if you can get them to guarantee that they'll have a certified arborist on the crew that comes out and does the work. It might be that the salesman is a certified arborist, but boy, it's sure nice to make sure that part of the crew that's doing the work is certified as well. In their estimate, make sure that they say that they're going to clean up the site. It's one of the ways that people judge, probably the biggest way that people judge the work that an arborist does. Man, when they left, I could hardly tell they were ever here. They swept up, they raked up, they cleaned up. It's a huge deal. Make sure it's in the proposal or in the estimate. They will clean up the site. Check to make sure that stump removal is included if you're getting the tree removed. And are they going to remove the grindings? Are they going to add soil? Are they going to smooth it off so you can add sod or whatever you're going to do to that site? And make sure that they will warrant that they will repair or replace damaged property. Now, sometimes they use some pretty heavy equipment. There might be, mashing down of a little turf. A lot of companies, ask them if they're going to use planks to minimize that soil compaction. But you can expect a little bit, but anything that's permanent or permanently damaged, make sure that they're going to replace it. So, where are these people? Where are these wonderful arborists? All right. You can get them from referrals. You can, look them up from some advertising. Maybe they're a member of a professional association in your town. You can look at the roster. Or one of the best tools, and I refer people to this all the time, this Trees Are Good site that we talked about earlier. This treesaregood.org. They have a part of their website where you can find an arborist. And again, you can Google this just by find an arborist, and it'll pop up for you. And it's a great way to type in your zip code, and it'll give you a listing of all the certified arborists that are in your area. So it's a great, great tool, a great way to find an arborist and begin this conversation with them. All right. So kind of bottom line here, we want to make sure that people understand that arborists are skilled professionals. We expect the arborist to act like one. We want them to act like they're a professional, but it's also nice to know that they get treated that way as well, that they get treated like a professional. All right. So that's pretty much all that I have. If you need some more information about ISA or the Southern chapter, we've got our website down here, isasouthern.org, and that will get you there. But Alyssa, I guess I can turn my screen share off, and then if we have some time for questions, if people want to type those into the chat, or maybe they raise their hand and we can talk to them. But that's pretty much all that I have for the presentation.
Thank you, Skip. Yeah, so everyone should be able to unmute themselves now if you have a question you would like to ask. I see Scott Carlton has his hand raised. And I am
thank you. There were just two things I wanted to add. It was a great presentation, and coming from the utility arboriculture side, mention around stump grinding. Just something to keep in mind is to make sure that along with all those other great questions, to ask if a USA survey is going to be done, or call 811 to ensure that underground utilities are identified before
Great
stump
point.
grinding.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whatever the phone number is that in your area, and just about all parts of the country that I know of have it, have somebody come out and trace and find out where any underground utilities might be located. Bad things happen when you don't do that. So yeah, I appreciate that reminder. And the other thing, make sure the tree's on your property. A lot of times people are hiring an arborist to remove a tree and they say, well, yeah, this is on my property, and it might be a boundary tree. And so now we open the can of worms about who owns the tree. So we can do that one at a later date, Neil and Alyssa.
Yep. And then the last one is just the 10-foot minimum approach distance for non-line clearance contractors. A lot of arborists will say, hey, I know how to work around high voltage power lines, but there's OSHA regulations. So a lot of other little nuances, but those are two near and dear to me that I thought I would just mention. So
great
thank
stuff.
you.
And I do appreciate you bringing that up. This whole idea of trees and utilities, you may have a tree that's located near some wires. And when you're talking to them about the pruning, you kind of look up there and go, hey, are you comfortable getting by those wires? Oh yeah, no problem. Well, it is a problem. A lot of the expert witness work that I've done has been related to electrocution. So, there are minimum approach distances. Make sure that your arborist understands that, or maybe that they've been through some training. There's some training called EHAP, Electrical Hazard Awareness Program. Those are always pluses to know that the arborist has a full appreciation and a full understanding about trees and utilities and getting near those utility lines. Nobody likes the outcome when things go awry. Okay. Johnny, looks like Johnny's got a question.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Hey, Skip, great presentation. Really do appreciate the vast knowledge that you have in this industry. But I am curious. Now, we all know and love trees and appreciate the value in which they bring to our properties. Have you heard any details? I know you deal with insurance companies. Do you think there may come a time where actually insurance companies look at trees value on your property differently in the future?
Yeah. Johnny, the answer is it's not that a time will come. The answer is that the time has come. I run into this, I don't want to say all the time, but at least a few times a year, where a homeowner has received a letter from their insurance company, and the insurance company says, hey, you got to remove this tree. And the assessment is made by someone who's not an arborist. They're an insurance adjuster. And I don't want to slam the insurance industry. They have a job to do and we need them. But the other thing that people may get is a letter from their insurance company that says, hey, congratulations, you are going to receive a free home inspection. We're going to send an inspector out and you will get a free inspection. And some people are like, oh, that's great. They're going to come out and inspect my house. Well, the majority of people are going to go, uh-oh, they're looking for things to make me do, or they're going to exclude it from my insurance. And it happens. It happens. So yeah, Johnny, as an industry, whether it's International Society of Arboriculture or TCIA, whoever, we need to have more dialogue with the insurance trade so that there's a good, clear understanding about this. And there is some dialogue. When we developed the tree risk assessment qualification, there was some dialogue with people in the insurance industry. But I think there's certainly a need for more. Great point.
Thank you.
Well, we
I
are
feel like-
technically over time. I was gonna just put up a slide for the next webinar. And then if anyone does have questions, Skip, I don't know if you can stick around for another minute or two, but real quickly, I was just gonna tell everyone if you can see that. So next month, June 15th, we're going to hear from Dr. Jennifer Franklin, who's actually here at UT in the School of Natural Resources, about how trees really work.
Okay.
So look for that registration info on the Urban Forestry website. And then it looks like we have a few more questions still. Let's see, Duff, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Sure.
Thank you for the comments about the insurance. Here in Washington, D.C., we have strict laws regarding trees on private property. And insurance, we get this happen all the time. The residents get in trouble legally because insurance companies will say, "Oh, I'm not going to insure your property with that tree," and they remove trees and they're not allowed to. So I would recommend people know their local ordinances and laws regarding trees, because there are some areas in the country that have strict tree laws, and you can get in trouble with the government for not properly proper permits.
Yeah, great point. You kind of heard the sigh in my voice. I spent some time in my career actually writing some tree protection ordinances and tree protection language in municipalities that kind of brought on some of these requirements for removing trees from your own private property. At the time, it was well-intentioned, but some municipalities have really taken that and run with it to the point where, my goodness, if you want to remove a 6-inch tree in your backyard that is dead, you have to get a note from your arborist, like you have to get a note from the teacher or something, or a note from your parent. And it's gone a little too far. But I certainly understand that some municipalities want to have some ordinance language that protects trees because they view trees as a societal benefit. Even though the tree's on your property, it's producing oxygen that everybody breathes. I know for some folks that's an eye roll, but I understand that and I get it. But I think we just need to be very careful about not crossing the line and requiring too much. I think if a construction project's going to impact several trees, some requirements are fine, but just to do something in your own yard and a tree, I don't know. It's a topic for another time, and it gets into the whole trees and the law thing. I've taught classes in the southern chapter in North Carolina and also in Alabama, and I love the topic just because I'm involved with it all the time. So maybe something for a future date. Tim Noble, I saw your comment about the presenter has a very personable manner and relatable. And I appreciate that. Thank you. But I can be a big jerk as well. So, but I appreciate the comment.
Lisa, while we're waiting for a few more people to comment, let me just say that you did a great job, Skip, and just a personal perspective. My opinion of a professional arborist has radically changed over a 40 plus year career I've had in urban forestry, starting in Alabama. And it began with really just a total ignorance of what was or what is an arborist. To today, I have the utmost respect for that profession. You mentioned the different types of arborists that there are, and I'm glad you did that. But you look at a tree climber, a professional arborist, and it's a unique combination of brawn, muscle, but also brain. And I don't know of another
Absolutely.
profession that does that.
Yeah.
And then a good arborist, arboricultural firm, it's an art and a science. You know, they do their job well. You don't even know they've been there because it looks good, but it's all based on science. And I just think, as a parting comment here, is that all of us here need to do a better job of educating the public of what is a professional arborist. I don't think we've really done a good job, and that they're worth the money it takes to pay them to do their work. But you've helped to enlighten us. You've got the message, and we just need to get it out to more people.
That's right. That's right. And Neil, I think, you know, for those arborists that are on here, I think you're absolutely right. We need to sell it. You know, a lot of us tend to be very earthy, green kind of people. You know, that's why we like trees and we're passionate, but we kind of need to have a little bit of used car salesman in us. You know,
Yep.
we need to sell it. And people need to appreciate and understand that there are professionals out there who may appear to be a little earthy, right? But they have a tremendous knowledge and skill set. Because not many of us wear three-piece suits. I don't even wear one when I go into the courtroom. I don't think it's a good look for an arborist. But
You got a
but
rope
we
and saddle on.
yeah, but we are professionals. Absolutely.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, Skip. Elisa, does that cover most of our comments from our attendees? Okay.
Yes.
And just Skip, thank you so much. I think I heard you said you had an idea for another topic, so we're going to hold you to it. And look at
Anytime,
bringing
Neil.
you back.
This is super easy. Anything that helps to promote trees and professional arborists, I'm on board. I'm
Okay,
on
well,
board.
thank you much. Thank you much. And we hope to see everybody here again next month. I don't remember the date. Elisa, was it June 18th? Jennifer, okay. Well,
June 15th.
June 15th. All right. Well, that'll help expand our knowledge on how trees work and how we can use it in our careers. So thank you, everybody. And Skip, if you could stay on a second, and Elisa, but everybody be safe.